You're tuned to the Nowhere signal. What you're about to hear was never meant to be found. I hadn't planned to be driving this late. The road was empty, the kind of empty that made you feel like you were the last person on Earth. The only light came from my high beam slicing through the fog, and the only sound was the low hum of tires against cracked asphalt. I was somewhere between Redfield and nowhere, chasing a job interview I wasn't sure I wanted and trying not to think about the voicemail I hadn't listened to yet. The gas light blinked on. I cursed under my breath. No signal. Of course. There were no other cars on the road. No signs. Just mile markers counting up like they were daring me to keep going. Then, just past mile 190, the fog parted enough to reveal something that shouldn't have been there. A sign. Old. Rusted. Barely lit from a cracked bulb above it. Exit 191, Carrion Bay. And under it, scratched in faded paint. We close at sunrise. I slowed. Not because I meant to, but because something about the sign caught in my ribs like a hook. Carrion Bay. I'd never heard of it. I checked the map on my dash. Nothing. Just a dead zone between towns. Still, the exit was there. And I needed gas. And maybe coffee. Maybe silence that didn't feel so hollow. So I turned. The off-ramp curved too long, winding like a serpent into thick trees. There were no streetlights. Just the occasional flicker of moonlight through pines, and the road narrowing with every turn until it felt more like a forgotten driveway than anything else. Then, suddenly, the trees opened. And the world changed. A town sat nestled at the bottom of a sloping hill. Cobblestone roads, gas lamps glowing in soft orange hues, rooftops covered in moss and ivy. It looked like something from a dream. Or a memory. I blinked. There was no sound. Not even crickets. Just the slow swing of an iron gate creaking as I drove past a sign. Welcome to Carrion Bay. Population. Established, unknown. A strange warmth seeped into my chest. Not comfort. Familiarity. Like I'd been here before. But that wasn't possible, was it? The first person I saw was an older man sitting on a wooden stool just outside a small general store. He wore a beige coat, hands folded in his lap, eyes closed. As I passed, he opened them. Didn't think we'd get a new one tonight, he said, voice low like it didn't want to echo. I rolled the window down. Gas station around here? He nodded, slow and deliberate. Couple blocks down. Left at the clock tower. The clock tower's hands were spinning. Backward. Appreciate it, I said. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Don't linger too long, friend. Sunrise changes everything. I asked what he meant, but he just closed his eyes again. The gas station looked abandoned at first. An old Gulf sign swinging in the breeze, paint peeling from the wood siding. But the lights above pump 3 were on, faint and flickering. I stepped out of the car. The air was still, so still it felt wrong. I could smell the ocean, but there was no breeze. Not even a whisper of it. The gas pumped slower than it should have. I looked around. No one in sight. Just quiet shops, shuttered windows, and that strange spinning clock ticking louder than it should have from a block away. I walked toward the station door to pay, but it creaked open before I could touch it. A girl stood inside. Couldn't have been older than 20. Red knit sweater. Sharp eyes. You're not supposed to be here, she said. Neither are half the towns I've stopped in this year, I replied. She didn't smile. Carrion Bay isn't a place you find. It's a place that finds you. I raised an eyebrow. Well, Carrion Bay might want to find someone with a better sense of humor next time. That made her smile. Just barely. Pump threes on the house. Consider it a welcome gift. But if I were you, I'd be leaving soon. I looked around again. What is this place? She hesitated. Then, it's where people go when they're not ready to wake up. She didn't look like someone who belonged in a town like this. The girl behind the counter stood still, like she was bracing for something, like she expected the walls to fall in at any moment. Her sweater had a loose thread near the collar, and I watched her fingers tug at it absently as we spoke. So, I said, stepping a little further inside, are you in charge of this place? She shrugged. Does anyone feel in charge of anything here? Not really. I looked around. There were rows of snacks with faded labels, drinks in a cooler that buzzed a little too loud. But nothing looked touched. Not in years. I'm just here, she said. Same as you. Though I guess I've been here longer. I leaned against the counter. What's your name? She paused. Then said, Lee. It didn't feel like the truth. But I didn't push. And you? She asked. Cal. Short for something? I gave a tired smile. Long for nothing. She actually laughed. Briefly. Like it caught her off guard. I'm guessing I'm not the first outsider to show up, I said, nodding toward the window. She hesitated again. She did that a lot, I was starting to notice, like she was constantly weighing how much to say. No, she said. Not the first. Not even the 100th. But you might be the first who doesn't realize why you're here. That caught me. I leaned forward. What's that supposed to mean? Lee looked away, eyes focused on something distant, or invisible. This place. Carrion Bay, it pulls people when they're on the edge of something. When they're not quite ready to let go. It's like a stopover between things. Between endings and beginnings. You're talking like this is some kind of afterlife. No, she said, sharply. Not death. Not exactly. Then what? She picked at the thread again. Something like forgetting. Or refusing to remember. That didn't make much more sense. Okay, I said slowly, so how do I leave? You don't. I laughed. That a metaphor, or are you planning on locking the door? She didn't laugh this time. Just stared at me with eyes that had seen this scene before. You'll try to leave, she said. Everyone does. Maybe you'll even think you did. But if you don't find what brought you here, you'll be back. Over and over. Her words gave me a chill I didn't want to admit to. I just came here for gas, I said. Lee raised an eyebrow. Sure you did. I looked toward the door. I wanted to leave. Not because I believed her, but because a part of me, some buried, irrational part, did. She stepped around the counter and walked to a small dusty cabinet behind the station window. She pulled out a folded map, yellowed at the edges, and handed it to me. It had no roads. No landmarks. Just a looping line around a shape I didn't recognize. At some point, she said, you'll stop looking for where you are, and start asking when. As I turned to leave, she said one last thing. If you hear the music, don't follow it. I froze. What music? But she didn't answer. She had already disappeared behind the curtain in the back. I left the station with the map still in my hand. It fluttered in the wind like it didn't want to be held. I tucked it into the glove box, started the engine, and eased back onto the main road through Carrion Bay. If you could even call it that. The cobblestones hummed under my tires. The streetlights flickered, slower this time, like they were dimming with each second. And that clock tower, still spinning its hands backward, ticked louder now. Echoing through empty alleys like a heartbeat that didn't belong to me. I didn't say goodbye to Lee. I wasn't sure I believed a word she said. I just wanted to be gone. At the edge of town, I reached a fork in the road. No signs. No names. Just two paths. One that curved uphill into thick trees, and another that dipped downward toward what looked like an open plain swallowed in fog. I picked the uphill path. It felt more like an exit. 5 minutes in, something changed. The fog grew thicker, swirling unnaturally. My headlights could barely cut through it. The road narrowed. I could hear the sound of something dragging along the pavement behind me, but when I checked the rear view, there was nothing there. Just more fog. The trees returned. Then, buildings. The clock tower. The diner. The gas station. I was back in Carrion Bay. I slowed to a crawl, staring out the window in disbelief. I hadn't turned. I hadn't stopped. And yet here I was, right where I started. I took the other road this time, the downhill path through the plain. Same thing. Fog. Stillness. Then the loop. Carrion Bay again. Third time, I tried driving straight through town, past the old church, past the cracked bridge I hadn't noticed before. I went faster, ignoring stop signs, passing the same house 3 times, 4, until the road just ended. No warning. No drop. Just nothing. The pavement crumbled into white space. A wall of mist that looked like it had depth but gave nothing back. Like a loading screen that never finished. I got out of the car. The air here was cold. Sharper. Like breathing in the moment before a storm. I tossed a rock into the mist. It made no sound when it disappeared. Behind me, the radio crackled. I hadn't turned it on. A voice, faint and trembling, came through. Do not follow the music. If you've already heard it, it's too late. Then static. Then silence. Then music. It was soft. A lullaby maybe. Played on an old music box. A haunting, looping melody that felt familiar. Like something you forgot in childhood but could hum in your sleep. I stood frozen. It was coming from the woods. No, not woods. A path. Small. Hidden beneath moss and mist. I hadn't seen it before. And now, I couldn't unsee it. A part of me, maybe the same part that turned at exit 191, wanted to follow it. But something deeper whispered, no. I got back in the car and slammed the door shut. Turned the engine. Tried again. Loop. Carrion Bay. The diner lights still flickered. The clock tower still ticked in reverse. And I sat behind the wheel, staring into a town that would not let me go. The third time around, I parked the car and killed the engine. There was no point pretending I could drive out of here. The road wasn't real, at least not in the way roads are supposed to be. And the town was watching. That's what it felt like. I stood in the center of the cobbled street, surrounded by shuttered buildings, glowing lamplight, and a sky that hadn't changed in hours. Midnight seemed to be stuck on repeat. I wasn't tired. I wasn't hungry. I wasn't anything. It was like the town had numbed me to human rhythms. Only one place had its lights still on, a 2-story house near the corner of Maple and Grove. Curtains drawn back. A single lamp glowing in the upstairs window. And someone staring out at me. I hesitated. There were rules in life, even unspoken ones, like don't knock on a stranger's door in a ghost town at night. But those rules didn't apply here. Nothing felt normal. Not the ticking in the clock tower. Not the girl in the gas station. Not the roads that led in circles like a dog chasing its tail. So I walked up the creaking steps and raised my hand to knock. The door opened before I touched it. A man stood inside. Mid-60s. Pale skin. Dressed like someone halfway through getting ready for bed, wool pants, buttoned shirt, slippers. His eyes locked on mine with a flicker of something hard to name. Recognition? "You're late," he said. "I'm sorry, what?" I asked, thrown off by the casual tone. He stepped aside and gestured for me to come in. "She said you'd show up eventually. Didn't think you'd take this long." "She?" I asked, still on the porch. "Lee." That name again. I stepped into the foyer. The air smelled like old paper and candle wax. A fireplace crackled in the adjacent room, though there was no wood in it. Just flame. Flickering. Dancing in unnatural silence. "I don't know who you think I am," I said carefully, "but we haven't met." He turned to face me fully. "Cal. Right?" I froze. I hadn't told Lee my name. I hadn't told anyone. "Look," I said, my voice lower now, "I don't know what's going on here, but I'm starting to get the sense that this town isn't just strange, it's personal." The man gave a tired smile. "That's the first true thing you've said tonight." He motioned to a chair near the fire. I sat down, mostly because my knees suddenly felt unsure. He poured tea from a kettle that hadn't been there a moment before. "I've been here a long time," he said. "So long I stopped counting nights." I sipped the tea. It was warm. Spiced. Too perfect. "You said Lee told you I'd come." He nodded. "She remembers people. Even when they don't remember themselves." "What's that supposed to mean?" "You've been here before." My stomach sank. "No, I haven't." He gave a sad smile. "You have. And you left something behind. That's why the town called you back." "I don't even know this place." "Not with your head," he said. "But your heart never left." I stood. "Okay, no. That's too much. I didn't come here for riddles or tea or whatever this place is supposed to be. I just want to go." "You can go," he said. "But you'll come back. Until you remember." I turned toward the door. He called out after me, "When you start seeing things in daylight, that's when it's already too late." Outside, the sky hadn't changed. Still midnight. Still stars like glass pins scattered across black velvet. The air was colder now. And faintly, from somewhere just beyond the houses, I heard the music again. The lullaby. Slower this time. Like something was running out of time. I didn't sleep. Back at the inn, yes, I somehow ended up there again, though I never walked toward it. The same brass key was waiting on the front desk. Room 3. Just like before. Only this time, the man behind the counter was gone. Or maybe he'd never been there. The bed looked exactly the same. The covers turned down. A book left open on the nightstand again, but not the same one. This time it was a photo album. I flipped it open. All the pages were blank. I left as the town's glow dimmed slightly. Still no sun. Still no time. Just the same eternal hour that wrapped Carrion Bay in its strange cocoon. I walked to the diner, mostly out of instinct. The kind of habit that doesn't come from memory, but from muscle. I didn't expect Lee to be there. She wasn't. A different woman stood behind the counter, older, hair coiled in a tight bun, wearing a name tag that read, Flora. She nodded at me like she'd known me her whole life. Back again? I paused at the door. Have we met? She just smiled and motioned toward the back booth. Go sit, sweetheart. It's where you always sit. I sat. Same corner. Same faded red cushion. It was cold, like no one had been there in a long time. Flora brought me coffee without asking. It smelled exactly like it did the night before. Sweet. Warm. Comforting. "Lee leave something for me?" I asked. Flora shook her head. "That girl's always drifting. You won't see her again till you're ready." "Ready for what?" "You keep asking the wrong questions," she said softly. Then, as if trying to change the subject, "You like photographs?" I blinked. "I guess." She pointed toward the wall behind me. I turned. There were dozens of framed black and white photos lining the wood-paneled wall. Some were dated, 1963, 1977, 1992. Others had no dates, just names. Most were faded. Then I saw it. Second row. Third frame in. It was me. I stood and stepped closer. Same eyes. Same face. Same jacket I was wearing right now. I was sitting in this exact booth, leaning back, a half smile on my face like I knew something I wasn't telling anyone. The photo was old, though. Dust clung to the frame. The edges curled like it had been there for decades. Below it, a plaque read, "Cal returned twice. Still waiting." My throat went dry. "Flora," I said, barely able to speak, "what is this?" She wiped the counter, not looking up. "Some folks come once. Some folks come twice. Some stay longer. I don't remember this. I don't remember ever being here." She gave a small, tired shrug. "The town remembers enough for both of you." I backed away from the wall. From the photo. From her. I stepped outside without another word, the coffee still steaming in the cup I left behind. Outside, it had started to rain, not hard, but steady. The drops made no sound when they hit the pavement. None at all. And in the distance, behind the mist-covered buildings and spinning clock tower, I saw something that hadn't been there before. A lighthouse. Its beacon swung slowly across the sky, casting wide arcs of pale blue light. Every time it passed, the shadows shifted. And something in me responded. Like it was calling. Or like I had heard it before, long ago, in a dream I forgot to remember. The light turned slow, deliberate. Each sweep of the beam sliced across the rooftops like a clock hand made of silence. I hadn't noticed it before, the lighthouse. I was sure of that. It hadn't been there. But now it was. It stood tall on a hill behind the town, where the forest gave way to cliffs. Its tower was black against the gray sky, made of stone that looked wet even when it wasn't raining. The light at the top flickered in a rhythm I didn't recognize, 3 slow pulses, then 2 quick ones, then dark. I couldn't explain why I needed to go there. I just knew I had to. The road turned to gravel as I walked. Carrion Bay faded behind me, though the sound of the backwards ticking clock followed. The air thickened the closer I got. My ears popped. My pulse slowed. And then, nothing. No wind. No birds. Not even fog. Just the lighthouse. Towering and still. There was no lock on the door. It creaked open with a soft groan, like it hadn't been touched in years but expected me all the same. Inside, the air was colder. Dust floated in beams of pale light that leaked through narrow windows. A spiral staircase hugged the wall, curling upward into shadow. At the base was a door. Unlike the main entrance, this one was sealed. Thick. Rusted shut. It bore no handle. Just a metal plaque bolted into it. Room of the Unremembered. I stood in front of it for a long time. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. Then, from above, I heard a sound. Footsteps. I looked up. A figure was descending the spiral staircase. Slow. Barely audible. A person, tall, thin, wearing a coat like mine. Same build. Same stride. For a moment, I thought it was a mirror. Then the figure stopped 4 steps above me. And I saw his face. Mine. Older. Worn. Eyes that looked through me instead of at me. "You're not supposed to be here yet," he said. I couldn't speak. He walked past me, brushed my shoulder, and stood in front of the sealed door. Then, calmly, he placed his hand flat against the plaque. A groan of metal. The door unsealed with a hiss of cold air and swung inward. The room beyond was round. Stone walls, no windows, and no lights, but it glowed faintly, like it had a memory of sunlight buried in its bones. At the center, a desk. On it, a stack of journals. Some leather-bound. Some cracked. Others wrapped in twine. All of them had my name carved into T. The light in the room wasn't coming from any source I could see. It didn't cast shadows. It just was. The air smelled like sea salt and paper left too long in the sun. I stood still for a moment, half expecting the older version of me to still be there, watching. He was gone. Only the desk remained. And the journals. I moved slowly, each step echoing slightly, though the room wasn't large. The journals were stacked neatly, one for each return, I realized. The spines were numbered in tallied lines. 5. 10. 12. The top one was already open. I didn't remember writing in it. But the handwriting matched mine. Entry 1, arrival, again, I came back last night. Or this morning. Hard to say. Lee was waiting, but she wouldn't speak to me this time. She only looked disappointed. I think I'm losing more each time I come through. The town is thinning. So am I. Entry 4, the clock tower. It doesn't keep time. It counts attempts. Every full rotation marks one loop. I asked Flora once how many loops the town could hold. She didn't answer. I think the silence meant infinite. Entry 7, memory slip. Saw a version of myself walking toward the cliffs. I didn't follow. I think that was the test. The music box played that night. Louder than usual. I almost followed. Almost. I flipped ahead. My fingers trembled slightly. The next entry wasn't in my handwriting. It was sharper. More elegant. Each letter etched with precision. It was Lee's. Cal, if you're reading this, it means the loop hasn't broken. You don't remember, but I do. I always do. That's what makes me different. You've come back 12 times. The first time, you were searching. The second time, you were escaping. The last 3 times, you just didn't want to wake up. You keep asking what this place is. It's not a town. It's a memory that refused to fade. And it's yours. You built it. You locked yourself in. I just stayed to keep the door open. My breath caught. The air felt thinner. Heavier. I ran my hands along the desk, searching for something to ground myself. At the back of the drawer, I found something hard. Cold. A key. On the tag attached to it, Room 0, Seafoam Rest, not Room 3. Room 0. The door behind me opened. No sound. No click. Just the heavy sensation of permission. I stepped back out into the tower. The light hadn't returned. And neither had time. The key felt heavier than it should have. It pressed into my palm like it had weight beyond metal, like it remembered too much. I didn't walk back to the inn so much as I arrived at it. I didn't remember turning corners or crossing streets. Time in Carrion Bay had begun to fold inward, wrapping around me like a coat I hadn't realized I was wearing. The seafoam rest looked exactly the same. Porch light still flickering. Brass bell above the door unmoving, even when I stepped inside. This time, the front desk was completely empty. No books. No key rack. No ledger. Just one note, handwritten on a torn scrap of map paper: "You're almost there." Room 0 wasn't on the main floor. It was behind a narrow, warped hallway I hadn't noticed before, just past the maintenance closet and the door that used to read staff only. The key slid into the lock without resistance. The door opened inward with a sigh. And I stepped inside. It was not a hotel room. It wasn't anything like the others. It was a child's bedroom. Blue wallpaper with stars painted on it. A small twin bed. Stuffed animals lining the windowsill. A worn-out astronaut poster curled on one wall. A lamp shaped like the moon. I stepped further in. My chest tightened. There was a photo frame on the nightstand. I picked it up with shaking hands. It was me. 12 years old. Smiling in a way I didn't know I could anymore. Next to me, kneeling, was my older brother, Eli. I dropped the frame. It didn't shatter. The bed creaked behind me. I turned, half expecting to see him. But there was only a folded blanket, carefully placed. A familiar one, gray with orange stripes. The one he always wrapped around me when I couldn't sleep. My knees gave out and I sat on the edge of the bed. The air here felt old. Not in a dusty way. In a remembered way. A preserved moment. And it was mine. A voice came from the doorway. "You never let yourself remember." I turned. Lee stood there, no longer distant, no longer veiled in riddles. "You kept this room locked since the first time you came to Carrion Bay. All the loops. All the years. You kept walking past it." I swallowed hard. I didn't want to see him. "I know," she said softly. I looked around the room again. "He died when I was 15. You blamed yourself." I nodded. She stepped inside and sat next to me. "He always looked after me," I whispered. "When my parents weren't home. When I had nightmares. He used to," I stopped, choking on the words. "Used to tell me stories about space. About how the stars were just memories lighting their way home." Lee smiled gently. "You built this place so you wouldn't have to remember the night he died. That's why Carrion Bay exists. It's your in-between. A place where you're allowed to pause. But not forever." I wiped my face. "So how do I leave?" She placed her hand over mine. "You already are." The wallpaper started peeling away in strips. The light outside the window changed. From twilight to sunrise. For the first time since I arrived, the sun was rising over Carrion Bay. I stood, light washing over my face, and for a moment, I felt it. Release. The sun touched the rooftops like it hadn't in 100 years. Its light wasn't harsh, it was gold, warm, and slow, like it was trying not to wake the town too quickly. The fog receded, slinking back between trees and alleys. The shadows that used to stretch unnaturally now folded into place like they'd always belonged. Carrion Bay was fading. Not in a violent way. But in the quiet way that dreams end. I stood outside the seafoam rest, watching as the sky shifted. The clock tower had stopped spinning. Its hands pointed to 6:17. A real time. A final time. Lee stood beside me. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Somewhere down the street, I could hear music again, not the Eerie music box tune from before, but something different now. Simpler. Gentler. Like the sound of someone humming to themselves while making breakfast in a kitchen filled with morning light. I turned to Lee. Will I remember all of this? She paused before answering. Not all at once. But pieces. The important ones. The feeling of it. And you? She smiled faintly. I've always been a part of this place. But once it closes, I think I finally get to rest. I nodded. We walked to the edge of town together. The sign was still there. Welcome to Carrion Bay, we close at sunrise. The last time I read it, it made no sense. Now, it felt like a whisper I had finally learned how to hear. At the edge of the road, a car was waiting. My car. Clean. Tank full. Keys in the ignition. I turned to say goodbye, but Lee was already gone. Just footprints in the dew-covered grass. I took one last look at the town as it flickered in and out of view, like it was being erased gently from reality, returned to whatever corner of the soul it had come from. And then I opened the door. I started the engine. And I drove. The sun rose behind me, and the road stretched ahead. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't look back. Not even once. The nowhere signal will return tomorrow. Until then, rest well.